Hey guys, so today we're looking at the Cuban Missile Crisis. So here's the deal. In 1989, the US kicked Spain out of Cuba. This was the Spanish-American War with Teddy Roosevelt when the US said, "Oh, you blew up the main, so we're invading Cuba now." That was that war. After the US kicked out Spain, they technically gave Cuba their independence, but they set up a dictator named General Batista to lead the country. The US let General Batista do whatever he wanted to the Cuban people as long as he gave the US whatever it wanted in Cuba. So General Batista was able to make him and his friends rich at the expense of the Cuban people, so hurting farmers and other people to make him and his friends rich as long as he let American businessmen do whatever they wanted in Cuba. Now, communist rebels led by Fidel Castro on the left and Ernesto Che Guevara on the right led an uprising against Batista in 1954. They said that they would take the land away from Batista and the rich people, give it to the farmers. They said they would stop allowing American businesses to do whatever they wanted, and they said they would get rid of Batista. When they took over, the new communist government stopped giving the United States special treatment. They kicked out American businesses, they took land away from rich people, and they killed anyone who disagreed with them. So if you disagreed with the communist government, Che Guevara would come, take you, and kill you. Now, the US refused to recognize the new government. In 1961, the CIA, the US spy agency, the Central Intelligence Agency, sponsored an invasion attempt. So they gave people money and guns to invade Cuba and get rid of Castro. This failed, and it was embarrassing for the US, and it made Cuba really, really angry. So, before the Cuban Missile Crisis started, what was the relationship like between Cuba and the United States? Now, in 1961, the US deployed nuclear missiles in Turkey. This was a big deal because, as you can see on the map, these missiles were near enough to the Soviet Union in red that they could hit cities in Russia. So, if you look at the yellow circle here, all of these cities, Leningrad, Kiev, Moscow, can now be hit by nuclear missiles before the USSR would have a chance to respond. Castro had offered to put Soviet missiles in Cuba where they could threaten the US the same way the US missiles were threatening Russia. And Nikita Khrushchev, the Soviet leader, agreed to put the missiles in Cuba in response to the American missiles. In 1962, CIA spy planes saw the missiles in Cuba. President Kennedy demanded that the Soviet Union take their missiles out of Cuba. Khrushchev refused. Kennedy sent ships to blockade the island. So he sent ships to basically surround Cuba and said that if the Soviets sent any more ships to Cuba with more missiles, he would shoot at the Soviet ships. Nikita Khrushchev told his ships to keep sailing to Cuba and to make their deliveries. So publicly, they're basically threatening a war with each other. But while they were publicly threatening each other, so this is Kennedy and this is Khrushchev, they worked behind the scenes, so in secret, to avoid a war. John F. Kennedy and had a brother named Robert F. Kennedy. So John Kennedy, we sometimes call JFK, and Robert Kennedy, he's also called Bobby Kennedy, is also called RFK. Now, John sent his brother Bobby to talk to the Soviet ambassadors and to make a deal. The deal that they made was this: the US would take its missiles out of Turkey, and the Soviets would take their missiles out of Cuba. Now, this deal was a secret, so the public never knew about it in either country. And even though the deal saved the whole world from a war, since people didn't know about the deal, they saw this as an example of Kennedy standing tough up to Khrushchev and making Khrushchev back down. So even though there was a secret deal, in public it looked like Kennedy had won and Khrushchev had lost. This helped Kennedy, and it made Khrushchev look weak. So did the public know the real story about the Cuban Missile Crisis? Why or why not? Alright, guys, that's it for today. I will talk to you on Monday, because we have Monday this week again. Alright, peace.